today I will be doing the first part of a series where I will be painting the same reference photo using different mediums, just so I can see how different these paintings end up being. For this one, I'm mostly going to be talking about the process for this painting, and I'm going to reserve the in-depth comparison video for the last one that's dedicated for that. And I will do the same for the other videos in the series. I'm gonna be using this relatively simple reference photo. I got it from Graphite Studio. I think it's more of a blank canvas where you can do a lot of things with it. So the first one I'm doing right now is for watercolors, and I think this is probably the most different out of all the other mediums, and mostly it's because it's just a transparent medium, and so the process is going to be different from the other ones. And also because it is very transparent, I am starting out with a very clean line work. I also started the whole process by wetting my paper with just water, and I'm doing that for this first layer so these colors will just melt into each other, and it gives me this hazy blur of colors that will sort of just guide me throughout the whole painting. So with watercolors, I always work from light to dark because it is transparent and you can't really paint highlights over dark layers. So that's what I'm doing right now. It's just for these initial layers I'm more painting what I want the highlights to look like. Or sometimes, and even for this one, there are some areas of the painting that I just left completely white. So it's just the paper that's showing and it's acting as the highlights. But for most of this painting and for most of my other works, I usually just like to put a layer of color over the whole painting before I start really getting into the details. I just really prefer that look that way. The basis of the colors for this piece is really just red and green. I have started to notice that I have been leaning more towards using green in a lot of my recent works. Usually before, when I first started, I was more drawn to purples and yellows. I just really like that combination, but also still have some red to my paintings. But I've been noticing a lot of green in my work lately, and I just clearly remember myself saying that green is my least favorite color, but now I am using it. I've been starting to like green lately. But also just for this one, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's because just this reference photo is it's leaning towards pink and orange. It looks very red overall, and not just because the model is a redhead, but also because her complexion is very warm orangey, and I think because of that it will benefit with having something cool and sort of the opposite of red, which is green, so that it balances the whole painting out. And I think it worked well. I think it worked well this time, especially on the left side of her face, where I started very orangey red and ended up with a green right on the edge of her face, and right where these colors mix together, I think just transitioned really well. The exact colors that I was using is Chinese orange with a little bit of carmine, and for the green I think I just mixed my own using yellow and a tiny bit of, was it cobalt blue? I will check again later and update you guys on the description, but I really like how these colors mix together. I was scared that it just would end up looking black, because I did add a good amount of red to the Chinese orange, but I really like the transitions and how it ended up looking. For some reason, I was thrown off by how pink her lips were, and so I just started adding more of the pink, sort of cool red to different parts of her face, like her freckles on her forehead and just some of the shadows on her neck. I think it ended up looking somewhat balanced. I like that the green is subtle for this piece, but it's still there and it's not just a full orange and red painting. I don't want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back too much, but I really like how these colors look right now. I just love how with the watercolors, blending paint into nothing is so effortless. So in a lot of this whole painting, what I did was just lay down colors, let them simmer into the paper and pool a little bit. Before I go ahead and clean my brush, load it up with just water, and sort of just drag the paints over into the lighter parts of the painting. I really enjoy doing that, especially for the area between her eyes, like right where her nose is, where it's the darkest. I really liked how it turned out, and I also really liked how I did the freckles, just because I think it's the part of the painting that really worked best with that technique, because I was really just dotting in these very intense colors by themselves before I blended out the edges with a clean brush, and I think it ended up looking somewhat natural, unlike all of my other attempts with painting freckles before. So I think that's good. But also the colors that I used for freckles isn't just one color, so as I am moving onto the right side of her face where it's lighter, I've started using more warm and yellow oranges for her freckles, as I'm going over to the darker parts of her face, I am adding more brown and reds to it. So I also want to talk about something else. With watercolors, your paper will matter more than I think with any other medium, because and almost in some ways your paper is more important than the paints that you are using. So something like this, where I'm using very rough paper and it's pure cotton. It's the Baohong cold pressed watercolor paper. It's just student grade, but I feel like it's exactly what I need for watercolors. I'm just saying this in this video because you might want to recreate this painting and have some frustrations because your painting isn't looking the same way as mine is, and most of the time it's really just your paper. So if you're getting frustrated, just try and switch things up. Try and use the similar kind of paper like I'm using. This one will just hold on to the paint more, and your paint won't move around on the paper so much, and also it just has a very different look, even if it's not just how your paint moves. So I also use Baohong hot pressed paper, which is the same kind. It's also cotton, but for the hot pressed one, I always end up with paintings that have a very different look to them. So keep that in mind when you're purchasing watercolor stuff, and also when you're watching other people's watercolor videos. Try to see which papers they're using when you want to recreate them. That was also the source of my personal frustrations before when I first started out with watercolors, is I was using the wrong paper. So just bear in mind that sometimes your paper goes out to be more important than your paints. But you will notice some differences with professional grade paints versus student grade paints. Some are more chalky and not as vibrant, but I feel like the differences are more drastic with different kinds of paper that you're using with watercolors. But yeah. So this painting turned out to be relatively simple in that a lot of the paper is still bare, so I'm not really painting as much as I think I would with other mediums. And also I think I stayed very close to the reference photo with the colors. I only did some minor adjustments for it, and also with somewhat the proportions. I didn't really play around with how her face looks so much. So I'm really excited to see what the other mediums will look like, because I feel like with gouache or with acrylics, I will be tempted to experiment more with the colors, and especially with acrylics. But I feel like with oil paints, which I am still debating whether to add it to the video, because I only just did one other painting with it, but I feel like if I were to do it with oil paints, the painting would also look very, very similar to the reference photo, but I feel like in a different way than with what I came up with today with watercolors. So yeah, I'm really excited for the rest of the series. I will be spreading out the videos so that it's not just me painting one photo for a couple of months. So I will also be adding in some of my normal videos in between, so it's not as exhausting to see. But yeah, that will be it for this one. Thank you guys for watching, and I will be seeing you again soon.